It has been a minute since we've been able to see some of our favorite teams in North American Valorant be stomped by Sentinels. Luckily, this week, the North American Stage 3 VCT is finally back. We get back to seeing weekly Valorant and our favorite teams be played. But what you might not know if you haven't been following the scene too closely is that a lot of teams have had a ton of roster changes. Your favorite team may not be the same as it was before the split. Out of the top 10 teams, only 3 have not changed anything in their rosters, those being Cloud9, Sentinels, and 100 Thieves. But every other team, as well as many other prominent Valorant teams, have changed significant parts of their roster. So I decided to make a quick compilation video of all the different changes that every team has gone through. I've made a graphical version of this on my Twitter, you can go check that out.
Follow me on Twitter, please.
But I decided to make this video to give a little bit more insight on every single switch and what I know. So without further ado, here is every major roster switch up going into Stage 3 of VCT. So let's start off with what is probably considered the most unfortunate pickup, and that's coming from Faze Clan. So Faze recently dropped Marv from their roster and replaced him with a prospect player, Baby J. Baby J has played on teams like Rice and Meatballs. The reason why this is the most unfortunate pickup is because they both have a Baby Bay and a Baby J on the same team, and that sounds terrible. Next, let's talk about version 1. We've seen them recently, just as recently as Masters 2, and they were doing incredibly well on the world stage. Unfortunately, they have probably the most interesting mix-ups. Going into Masters 2, their new player Whippy was actually unable to make it to Iceland, and so they had to play with a sub, Jammies. Now, Jammies did incredibly well for them, but Whippy is coming back to the roster, therefore Jammies is out of the picture. However, there's also another player that is suspended from Series 3, and that is Zelsis, for what I can only describe as a gamer moment. Now, Zelsis has been replaced by Thief from LG, who is joining the version 1 roster, at least for this series. We aren't sure if Thief is staying past that, if they're dropping Zelsis entirely, but as of right now, we only know that he's playing for at least this series. Envy is probably the best North American team that has won nothing. They have an incredibly strong lineup, but have not been able to close out those winning games. So I decided to drop Caboose and pick up a new player, and it's looking to be like that player is Marv from Faze. Envy is no stranger to grand final appearances, but let's see if they can finally start winning some. I'm really excited to see what GenG has to offer because their roster was incredibly strong going into Masters 1. However, in Masters 2, they kind of faltered out. And almost immediately, they dropped Quinn, who was one of the original French Canadians on the roster. Now, in his stead, they actually picked up Nature from Immortals. Now, Nature is a really interesting pick because Nature's inclusion shakes up the entire roster. GMD was the IGL and smoker for the team, but it's looking like he's switching off of IGL and switching off of smokes to be the team's new duelist. So we have GMD likely on duelist, Mikael on his Sova, Sean on entry, Kusta looking to switch off of Sentinel for the smoker role that GMD was, and Nature being the IGL and Sentinel for the team. I'm really excited to see what this team does going forward. TSM might have the most unfortunate track record of any North American Valorant team. They have some of the best players in the world on their team, and they just can't do shit. They brought in Brax at the beginning of last Masters and said, guys, we figured it out. We're switching it. We're going to change the game here. After Brax played 4 games with them, he was never played with them again. And it was a team of Wardell, Sabrosa, Drone, Cutler, and Hazed. And the same thing happened. They just didn't qualify for Masters. And so this time they're back at it. They're saying, guys, we're changing the game. We're dropping Brax. It feels like Brax is just this hot potato of, he's the guy that will fix our team. And it never works. Anyway, so this time they've dropped both Brax and Cutler and replaced their 5th member with Bang off of X Serenity. Hopefully we'll see TSM bring it back at least some way or another, switch up their gameplay, switch up their team a little bit, and see if they can compete like they used to back in the day. We'll check up on Brax later. Luminosity is another one of those teams that did incredibly well at the beginning of the year, but going into the second Masters series, they really started to struggle. They have some really strong players in a Proto, Dre, and Moose. They decided to drop both Stellar and Thief. We already saw Thief move to V1, but Stellar as well, and pick up 2 new players in Ban and Dazzle. Ban coming from an X Serenity squad, and Dazzle coming from Ghost Gaming. Hopefully, again, like these other teams, these roster changes will be able to set them apart from every other team. Every time NRG has a roster change, I get so excited to watch them play because the most recent roster change for NRG happened when Daps announced that he's retiring from competitive play. He went on to coach CSGO, and I'm happy for the man. But they somehow picked up WeDid from XSET as the new IGL for NRG. WeDid, one of the most notorious players on XSET alongside Dwifo, is an incredibly strong player. Somehow sniping him from XSET is a shock to me. Their newest squad has Som, EU, Android, Tex, and now WeDid. And this team is looking better and better every time they get a roster switch. I'm very, very excited to see how they do going into this. I'm saying there everybody, but I'm actually very excited for NRG here. Immortals, we all know as the meat factory of the Valorant competitive scene. They pick up young prospect players, they do much better than they should, and then they drop them, or they sell them. Most recently, they dropped two of their strongest players in Nature and JC Stanny. These are two of the strongest players, and they just let them onto the free market. Nature picked up almost immediately. JC Stanny, we'll get to him later. And they didn't even sell him. They just had him for so cheap and they didn't want to re-sign. It boggles me. But Immortals, still with an incredibly strong lineup, replacing their fifth member with Jonah P from Complexity. This team is just looking very good. I already talked a little bit about how WeDid was sniped from XSET, but XSET was actually able to recover. So they picked up not one, but two new players to have a new 6-man roster. Their IGL pickup was Def from Dignitas. Def has been in the CSGO scene for a while, so hopefully his expertise will be able to bring a more mature vision to XSET. As well, they picked up a very interesting player in Zekin from Noble. If you don't know who Zekin is, he's a 16-year-old Valorant player, so he's still incredibly young. But I'm thinking they picked him up as like a way to train him up to be one of the XSET like star players. He's a very good player, so I'm excited to see what they do with this new 6-man roster. Def can kind of make up for his time at Dignitas, because unfortunately, they were dropped after many, many unfortunate games. Over the break from Valorant, T1 had a bit of a PR crisis, I'll call it. Let's just say that Dazed had a bit of a gamer moment. And everyone was saying, is Dazed gonna get dropped? Is Dazed gonna get dropped? And Spider came out and said, no, like, we're all friends. It's a lot better now. Dazed was dropped from T1, and unfortunately, alongside him, Spider injured his hands and is unable to play for at least a little bit. So I put him as injured. I think he's still on the team, just inactive for the moment. So T1 had to find two new players to fill those slots. So alongside their already really strong lineup in Curry, Automatic, and Skadoodle, they picked up Dawn from Pittsburgh Knights, as well as... Next up we have AndBox. AndBox did actually very well in the Masters 2, being one of the only teams in written history that has beaten Sentinels. After a lot of roster changes, they settled with a pretty good team. But just recently, after Immortals just released some incredible players on the roster, they switched out Boy for JC Stanny. JC Stanny, an incredible duelist. So it's just unfortunate for Boy. Hopefully Boy will find another team to play on, because he is also a very strong player. And I'm excited to see how they do. The final change I want to highlight is a new esports org joining into Valorant, and that is Darkzero Esports. Very popular in the Rainbow Six scene. They picked up Kooky Koalas, which has some actual very notable names on it, including Kohler, who's been on some strong teams like Beast Coast, as well as Screwface, who's an incredibly strong player. Hopefully, this team will be able to get the resources they need to become one of the new top Valorant teams, and I'm excited to see what they do. Thank you for watching. This video was a little bit off the cuff. I just kind of off the dome. Shit. I decided to quickly make this video because I thought it was important to know. I struggled to understand all the different roster changes, so I needed this for myself. Going forward, we'll go towards more traditional off the dome videos, and those will be coming back soon. Thank you always for watching. Have a good one.